All right, welcome to Flip Mastery Algebra with the Algebros. I am Mr. Sullivan. I'm at Kaiser High School. Those of you over at Ramstein listen to this with Mr. Brust, and over in Baumholder with Mr. Kelly. Hope you enjoy this. Remember, it's a process. It's all about you learning, all right? So first thing I want you to do right now, the first section we're going to talk about is evaluating expressions in the order of operations. Very first thing I want you to do, pause the video, copy everything down. All right, then when you're done with that, unpause it and we'll talk a little bit about it. All right, so go ahead right now and pause the video. All right, good. Now I'm assuming that because I'm back is because you are done with copying down these notes. One thing you need to know is you need to be focused on these notes. So if you're just copying this stuff as I talk, you're not really listening to what I have to say. And hey, I'm a really smart guy, so you want to listen to what I say, all right? All right, the first thing is, what is a variable? A variable is a letter used to represent one or more numbers. All right, the numbers are the values of the variable. So for example, a variable, the big one we use all the time is x, but it could be any letter, y, z, m, whatever you want, all right? Now obviously there's going to be some variables that we probably don't use a whole lot of, like we don't use O a whole lot because it looks like the number 0. So we probably won't use that a whole lot. I or L, those look like, those could be number 1, so we won't use those a whole lot. That's kind of why X is used a lot, all right? But these are all represent numbers. Sometimes X could equal 7, sometimes X could equal 4. It changes, it varies. That's why it's called a variable. X is not always going to be the same thing every time, all right? Number 2, an algebraic expression or a variable expression, and this is an expression that includes at least one variable. So for example, 2x plus 7. This is an expression. I have two things going on here. I'm adding them, and it has at least one variable, so this is an algebraic expression. I could have two variables, x plus y. That right there would also be an algebraic expression. I know a lot of times vocabulary is not that fun for all of us, but it's important that we can all talk in the same language. All right, so pause the video, copy this down too, then we can talk about it. All right, you're back. Evaluate. Evaluating is when I substitute a number for each variable and perform the operation or operations and simplify the result. This is like a direction. This is telling you what to do. A lot of times you're going to have directions, and what kids are really bad at is actually reading the directions. If it ever says evaluate, it means you're going to plug and chug. That's kind of what I always call it, plug and chug. All right. So let's take a look down here at some we can plug and chug. All right. Evaluate each expression when n is 3. So wherever I see my variable, I'm going to plug it in, n minus 2. So I see an n, I plug in a 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay? Over here, I'm going to plug in a 3. Ooh, this is tricky. This is 5 n's. That means 5 times n. All right? Anytime you don't see an addition or a subtraction or a division sign, it's multiplication. All right? And we're going to talk about how to solve this in a second. I'll tell you right now, 5 times 3 is 15. 15 plus 2 is 17. How did I know to multiply that before I added? That's something that we need to learn as well. That's evaluating. All right, so now we have powers. Powers are, another word for powers is exponent. You may want to write that above that, exponent, all right? An expression that represents repeated multiplication of the same factor. And like I said, those are called exponents. All right. So a power, this is the power. This is what we call the base. It's not 5 times 3. It's multiplying this base this many times. So we're multiplying 5 by itself 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. All right, so we have 3 factors of 5. All right, if we come down here and write these in words, this is 8 to the third power. And if I wanted to write it out as a product, I would write it as 8 times itself 3 times. This is x to the second power. And I write the x 2 times. So x times x. All right, and those are exponents and powers. This takes us now to the order of operations. In other words, how do we know when to do what? We were talking about this earlier. We have all these operations, you know, multiply, divide, add, subtract, exponents, powers, things like that. All sorts of things. How do we know which we're supposed to do and in what order? Well, if those kids in Ramside did it one way, and in Baumholder did it a different way, and in K-Town we did it a different way, then we'd all get 3 different answers, and we can't do that, all right? Now, what I call this is GEMDAS, okay? GEMDAS is not some wicked wizard, all right? Yes, it is Mr. Kelly's code name on all his logins, all right? He thinks it's like he's the wizard of Baumholder, but that's not what it is, all right? GEMDAS is the order of operations. Now, you may have heard it as PEMDAS with a P instead of a G, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But again, this is a simple thing to remember so that you can always know what order you're supposed to do these in. So the very first thing we're going to do is grouping symbols. Now, if you've heard PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, the P stood for parentheses. I don't like that, all right? Because parentheses, while parentheses is a grouping symbol, is it the only grouping symbol? It is absolutely not the only grouping symbol. We have brackets. That's a grouping symbol. We have a fraction bar. That's a huge grouping symbol. All right? We have what's called a radical. A radical groups things under here. That's a grouping symbol. That's why I don't call it PEMDAS, I call it GEMDAS. All right? So when I talk about GEMDAS, you need to know that G stands for grouping symbols. Any grouping symbol. All right? In other words, anything that groups things together. Here's another one. Absolute value bars. Those group things in here. All right? So when you're doing math problems, if you face a problem and you're like, ooh, what is that? I'm not sure what I've seen. Probably is a grouping symbol. Is it grouping a bunch of stuff together? And if it is, we have to go into that grouping symbol and do that first. All right. E stands for exponents. We just talked about that. These are our powers. All right? So the second thing we would have to do are powers. Any exponents we have, we would have to do those next. The third thing, now, this is determined from left to right. Okay? So I want you to understand you don't always do multiply then divide. You could be dividing then multiplying. It's all determined from left to right. That's the big key here, all right? So if I had this, for example, 10 divided by 2 times 4, I would have to do 10 divided by 2 first and get 5, and then do 5 times 4 and get 20. All right? I could not do 2 times 4 first. If I did 2 times 4 first, I get 10 divided by 8. Oh, and that's not even going to come out nice. It's going to be an ugly decimal. All right? Not that decimals aren't okay as answers, but it's not okay to get an ugly decimal when we do it wrong. Okay? The next one, and the next one is left to right as well. Addition and subtraction. All right? Same thing. Ooh, that should be a P. That is ugly. All right. I do addition and subtraction depending on what order they stand from left to right. This one's not as bad as multiply or divide. Multiply or divide, you could really screw up if you don't do left to right. Addition and subtraction won't always screw you up that badly, all right? But it's not a good habit to get into. It's always a good habit to do it right. All right, so we always start with our grouping. We do our exponents, multiply or divide, add or subtract. If you have a hard time remembering that, you just think of Mr. Kelly and Baumholder. He is the wizard. GEMDAS, the magical wizard. All right, so let's try one here. We got GEMDAS. GEMDAS. So, I'm looking at this thing here. Now I see a couple of things. First of all, I see an exponent. So I know I have an exponent. I see an addition sign. I know I have an addition. All right. I have a plus. I know that's oh, I already talked about that. Okay, what else? Well, I have this one right here. Now this one's tricky. What is that? It's a fraction bar, right? Well, fraction is division, but it's also grouping. So I have to do grouping first. So that means I have to do whatever is on top right here first. Okay? So on top I have 1 plus 5 squared. So I have adding and exponents. What comes first? The exponents. So 1 plus 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is, Sullivan, 25. Come on, man. Come on. Getting ahead of myself. 1 plus 25 over 50. All right? Hey, guess what? I make mistakes. It's cool. If you ever find a mistake, please let me know. It's a good thing to point out. All right, so now we still have groupings. So I have to do that first. 1 plus 25 is 26 divided by 50. All right? Now, you could divide that out if you'd like. All right? Put that in your calculator, get a decimal, or you could simplify, divide both by 2. I could simplify this fraction. I'd get 13 over 25. All right? But if you wanted to divide that out, you could also get a decimal. The 26 goes on top, right? Just like you see it, 26 divided by 50. And I believe you should get 0.52. All right? All right. So now let's go down here to this next one. We got a bunch of stuff in here, don't we? We have, let's write down GEMDAS. Mr. Kelly. We have grouping here. We have grouping here. We have an exponent. Oh, we have a lot. So the first thing we have to do is grouping. Inside this grouping, I have grouping inside, so I have to do that first. So I have 8 bracket 20 minus, what is 9 minus 5? It is 4. Don't forget the squared. Now, inside this grouping, I have an exponent. So I have 8 bracket 20 minus 4 squared is 4 times 4. It is not 4 times 2. 4 times 4 is 16. All right? Now I still have grouping. 20 minus 16 is 4. Okay? This brings up a great point. What operation is this? Anytime you can't see an addition, a fraction bar, or a division sign, or a minus sign. If you can't see one of those things, it's multiplication. 8 times 4, 32. All right? Sometimes we write multiplication with parentheses. Sometimes we write it with a dot in the middle of the air, right? Sometimes we write it with an X. Most of the time now, a lot of times we're going to write multiplication, like if we have variables, there won't be anything between the two, that's multiplication as well. Okay? All right, so now we're going to do some of that evaluating that we've talked about. All right? Evaluating, the first thing I have to do when I evaluate, if you remember, I have to plug in what I have. So I have, wherever I see y, I need to put 11. So I see 6 times 11 squared minus 13. All right, so when we have that, now we have our order of operations. I have multiply, I have exponents, and I have subtract. I need to do my exponents first. Exponents come first, so I'm going to do 6 times 121 minus 13. What comes next? Between multiply and subtract, multiply comes next. 6 times 121 is 726 minus 13. 726 minus 13 is 713. All right? So let's do this next one. We're going to evaluate when b equals 3. b equals 3. So wherever I see a b, I'm putting a 3. So I'm going to do 3 to the third minus 21. And this is a good first step. When we talk about showing your work, 5 times 3 plus 9, this is the first step we want to see. The reason we want to see this is because the more work you show us, the better we can find what mistake you make, if you make one. All right? Now, it's not our job. We're not trying to point out your mistakes and make you feel bad. We're trying to point out your mistakes so you learn from that one mistake and can go on. All right? So let's see what we have. This big fraction bar is the divide, but it also groups the top and the bottom. So let's do the top. I have exponents. 3 to the third is 27 minus 21. Now, because it's grouped and separated, I can also start working on the bottom. 5 times 3 is 15. That comes before adding. All right. Still have it grouped. 27 minus 21 is 6. And 15 plus 9 is 24. All right. 6 goes into 24. Reduces down to 1/4, or if you like decimals, 0.25. All right. All right, so you should always try and pause these, try them on your own, make a mistake or do it right, but then you learn from your mistake and you can move on. So pause the video, try them. When you're done, unpause them, see how you did. All right, so let's try the first one. We have grouping, exponents, and addition. So we have to do grouping first, so that's 1 plus 5 is 6 squared. Adding our exponents, we have to do the exponents. So 6 times 6 is 36, plus 5 is 41. All right, that's the first one. Let's check number 2. We have to plug in, wherever I see H, I'm going to put a 4. So 4 minus 2 times 2 minus 2. So I have subtraction, I have this as multiplication, and I have grouping subtraction. I have to do that first. So 4 minus 2 times 2 minus 2 is 0. Multiplication or subtraction, I got to do the multiplication. So 4 minus 2 times 0 is 0, and 4 minus 0 is 4. All right? Make sure as you do the practice problems, you check your answers to make sure you're doing them right, because remember, what we really care about is that you learn. It's not about just doing the work, it's about learning how to do all these great algebraic topics.